Emerging from the sands of Egypt, Napoleon Bonaparte returned to France ready to change Europe forever. His rise led to an epic naval clash that would decide the fate of empires, the Battle of Trafalgar. This battle was a test of strategy, courage, and sacrifice on the high seas, shaping history in ways no one could have predicted. While Napoleon was in Egypt, he closely followed the developments in Europe through newspapers and dispatches that arrived irregularly. On August 23, 1799, he suddenly decided to return to France to take advantage of the temporary absence of British ships that were blockading French ports. Although there were accusations that Napoleon abandoned his army, in fact, the Directory ordered him to return because France had suffered several defeats against the forces of the Second Coalition and feared an invasion. By the time Napoleon returned to Paris in October 1799, the military situation had improved significantly due to several French victories. However, the French Republic was on the brink of bankruptcy, and the corrupt and inefficient Directory had never been less popular. Emmanuel Sieyès, one of the members of the Directory, approached Napoleon seeking support for a coup d'état and the abolition of the Constitution. The conspiracy involved Napoleon Bonaparte, Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès, Napoleon's brother Lucien Bonaparte, who was the spokesman of the Council of 500, Roger Ducos, a member of the Directory, and Charles Maurice de Talleyrand. On November 9, 1799, 18 Brumaire, Napoleon carried out the coup. It took them 2 days to establish control and remove the legislative bodies. This allowed the reduced legislative body to appoint Napoleon, Sieyès, and Ducos as provisional consuls to govern the country. Sieyès had intended to use Napoleon to seize power for himself, but Napoleon outmaneuvered him and secured the adoption of the Constitution of the year 8, which ensured his election as first consul, making him the most powerful person in France. He further solidified his power with the Constitution of the year 10, becoming first consul for life. As first consul, Napoleon implemented several lasting reforms: centralized administration of departments, improvements in higher education, tax reforms, creation of a central bank, new legal codes, and upgrades to road and sewage systems. He negotiated the Concordat of 1801 with the Catholic Church to reconcile the Catholic population with his regime. On March 21, 1804, the Civil Code, known as the Napoleonic Code, was promulgated. This code, prepared by legal committees supervised by Jean-Jacques Régis de Cambacérès, the second consul, remains influential in many countries today. Napoleon actively participated in council meetings where draft laws were discussed. Additional codes were introduced, including one in 1808 for criminal procedure, establishing clear rules of trial that, by modern standards, favored the prosecution but helped curb abuses and protect personal freedoms. In 1800, Napoleon returned to Italy, where the Austrians and Russians under Suvorov had gained ground during his absence. Napoleon famously crossed the Alps riding a mule, the white horse depicted in popular paintings by Jacques-Louis David. His campaign started but turned in June 1800 with the victory at the Battle of Marengo, which led to a truce. His brother, Joseph Bonaparte, led the peace negotiations. Despite some Austrian resistance backed by Britain and their refusal to recognize the newly acquired French territories, Napoleon ordered General Jean Moreau to launch another attack. Moreau's victory at the Battle of Hohenlinden resulted in the Treaty of Luneville in February 1801, confirming or expanding French territorial gains. Great Britain signed the Treaty of Amiens in March 1802, agreeing to withdraw from several colonies. However, this peace was short-lived. European monarchies refused to recognize the French Republic fully, fearing revolutionary ideas might spread. Britain officially recognized France as a republic, but still supported royalist forces. They also protested French annexations in Piedmont and Napoleon's mediation in Switzerland, which were not covered by the treaty. In 1803, Napoleon suffered a severe defeat in Haiti. His forces, sent to reassert control, were decimated by yellow fever and insurgents led by Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Facing the impossibility of holding French territories in North America and anticipating renewed war with Britain, Napoleon sold the Louisiana Territory to the United States at a low price, $7.40 per square kilometer. Tensions over Malta continued, with Britain resuming war against France in 1803 and supporting French royalists. In January 1804, a failed assassination attempt on Napoleon was uncovered, sponsored by the Bourbons. In retaliation, Napoleon's police arrested the Duke of Mangan, who was tried secretly and executed in March 1804, despite no evidence linking him to the plot. This incident helped Napoleon justify restoring hereditary monarchy in France, with himself as emperor. Napoleon crowned himself emperor on December 2nd, 1804, at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, famously taking the crown from the Pope and placing it on his own head. Later, on May 26, 1805, he was crowned King of Italy in Milan Cathedral. The Battle of Trafalgar was the most significant naval battle of the Napoleonic Wars. It took place on October 21, 1805, between the British Royal Navy and the combined fleets of France and Spain off Cape Trafalgar on the southwest coast of Spain, between Gibraltar and Cadiz. At the time, France was the dominant military power on the European continent, while Britain controlled the seas. Britain had established a naval blockade against France, severely limiting French trade and naval operations. Although the French fleet managed to evade the blockade several times, they were never able to deliver a decisive defeat to the British Navy. Britain was able to attack French interests worldwide with ease. When the Third Coalition declared war on France, Napoleon planned to invade Britain. To succeed, he had to ensure that the British Navy could not stop the invasion fleet, which meant controlling the English Channel. The main French fleets were based at Brest in Brittany and Toulon on the Mediterranean coast. Smaller squadrons were scattered across other Atlantic ports. Spain, allied with France, contributed its fleet from Cadiz and Ferrol. Britain had experienced and well-trained naval officers, while most of France's best officers had been killed or dismissed during the Revolution. Vice Admiral Pierre-Charles Villeneuve was the most competent French officer commanding Napoleon's Mediterranean fleet. Napoleon's 1805 strategy was for the French and Spanish fleets to break through the British blockade, unite in the Caribbean, and then return to Europe to assist the Brest fleet in breaking the blockade of the Channel. This combined fleet would then control the Channel, allowing the invasion of Britain. Admiral Nelson commanded the blockade of Toulon early in 1805, maintaining a loose blockade hoping to lure the French fleet into a decisive battle. Villeneuve's fleet successfully evaded Nelson after a storm and sailed through Gibraltar to join the Spanish fleet, heading for the West Indies. Upon realizing this, Nelson pursued. Villeneuve returned from the West Indies intending to break the blockade at Brest. After suffering setbacks including losing ships off Cape Finisterre, he sailed to Ferrol. Napoleon's plans for invading England depended on the fleet assembling at Boulogne-sur-Mer. Villeneuve had 32 ships, with Vice Admiral Ganteaume's Brest fleet having 21 ships and 5 others, aiming to muster 58 ships for the invasion. Villeneuve was ordered to sail north towards Brest but deviated to Cadiz. The invasion army waited for the fleet, and when Villeneuve did not appear by August 26, 3 French invasion corps moved towards Germany, becoming fully engaged there. Nelson returned home after 2 years at sea, staying 25 days in England. News arrived on September 2nd that the combined French-Spanish fleet was in Cadiz. Nelson waited until September 15th when his flagship HMS Victory was ready. Vice Admiral Collingwood led 20 ships detached to face the enemy fleet in Cadiz, leaving only 11 ships to guard the channel. Nelson took command on September 29th. The British fleet used frigates to monitor the Cadiz harbor while the main fleet remained about 80 kilometers west of the coast. Nelson hoped to lure the enemy fleet out. The British fleet suffered supply issues, sending 5 ships to Gibraltar on October 2nd for provisions. The French fleet in Cadiz also faced supply shortages and a lack of experienced sailors. Many crew members had been blockaded in port for years with minimal sea time. Villeneuve hesitated to leave Cadiz despite improved supplies in October. French captains voted to remain in port. Napoleon ordered the fleet to sail at the first opportunity to meet Spanish reinforcements and land the invasion force at Naples, promising a determined fight if they encountered British ships. During the blockade, Nelson gave his captains instructions on combat tactics, emphasizing breaking the enemy line and concentrating superior force on one section. His plan was unconventional, abandoning the usual parallel lines in favor of dividing the fleet into 2 columns to penetrate the enemy formation. Villeneuve received orders of his replacement and news of British ships arriving at Gibraltar. He decided to engage before his successor's arrival. The French fleet left Cadiz on October 20th in a disorganized formation. Villeneuve attempted to organize 4 squadrons combining French and Spanish ships, but faced resistance from captains unwilling to leave port. By October 21, Nelson's fleet was 34 kilometers northwest of Cape facing Villeneuve's fleet positioned between them and the Cape. Nelson ordered preparations for battle at 6 a.m. Villeneuve turned his fleet toward Cadiz at 8 a.m., a maneuver complicated by the wind and inexperienced crews, causing a disordered line. At 11:45, Nelson sent his famous signal, "England expects that every man will do his duty." His fleet approached in 2 columns. Nelson led the windward column aboard HMS Victory. Collingwood led the other, on Royal Sovereign. The British ships moved slowly due to light winds, exposing leading vessels to heavy enemy fire for nearly an hour. HMS Royal Sovereign was the first to engage Admiral Alava's flagship, Santa Ana, delivering a devastating broadside. HMS Belle Isle engaged multiple French ships, suffering severe damage but holding on until relief arrived. HMS Victory endured 40 minutes under fire from 4 enemy ships. At 12:45, Victory broke through between Villeneuve's flagship Bucentaure and Redoutable, firing devastating broadsides and killing many gun crews. Villeneuve prepared to board Victory, but was thwarted by British resistance and timely support from HMS Temeraire, which inflicted heavy damage on Redoutable. A cannonball from Redoutable mortally wounded Nelson, who declared, "I am done for. I am dead," before dying at 4:30 p.m. Victory ceased firing to repel boarding attempts, but eventually British forces isolated and captured 22 enemy ships with no losses. Nelson's death and British victory secured maritime supremacy for Britain, ending Napoleon's hopes of invading England. Damaged ships sank or were blown ashore during subsequent storms, marking the end of a decisive chapter in naval warfare.